Hi there, it's Nisha. Today I'm going to show you how to edit food photos for Instagram. I'll share my top 10 tips for food photography editing, including all of the techniques I use every time I post a food photo to Instagram. If you're looking for more food photography resources, I have another video on my YouTube channel where I take you behind the scenes on how to style and edit a particular scene. I also have a series on my blog for beginner food photographers, and on my Instagram page at Rainbow Plant Life, I share lots of food photography tips and tutorials, so you can find the links to all of those resources in the description box below. I've gotten a lot of requests to do a video on how to edit food photos, so I hope you enjoy this one. And I'm also working on a video specific to Lightroom on how to edit food photos there, so stay tuned for that. My first tip to improving your food photos for Instagram is to get off Instagram. I know that sounds a little confusing, but when you have a photo you're ready to edit, your first instinct might be to just open the Instagram app and start using the different filters and tools there. While Instagram's filters might look good for your selfies or your travel photos or your fashion photos, unfortunately they generally make food look pretty unnatural most of the time. And that's because food photography is a really specific type of photography. It's not like travel photography or lifestyle or landscape. It's really dependent on light and white balance and color in a unique way. And so when you're editing, you want to keep that in mind. And Instagram's filters just don't cut it when it comes to food photography. So if you're not editing food photos in Instagram, where should you be editing them? And that is my second tip. Lightroom is a photo editing software from Adobe, and I think it's the best and most powerful way to edit food photos. And the reason I said invest in Lightroom is because it's not exactly cheap. It's about $150 for Lightroom, so I know that's not affordable for everyone, or maybe it's not in your budget right now. So I will mention a few alternatives in a minute. I do recommend it as an investment because it's an investment in your work, whether you're a professional or an amateur. It can really transform the quality of your photos, and that's why I'll be putting together a how to edit food photos in Lightroom series, so stay tuned for that. Some photographers use Photoshop for editing instead of Lightroom, but I find Lightroom a lot easier and more intuitive to use, and I feel like it has everything there. The only reason I would use Photoshop is if I wanted to make some sort of transformative Photoshop effect, like combining photos or something like that, which I don't do, so Lightroom is definitely sufficient for most food photographers. And the two alternatives I wanted to mention are Google Snapseed and ViscoCam. They're both mobile apps and they're both free, and they both can really make your food photos look better, even if they don't have all the capabilities of Lightroom. I like to start editing in Snapseed by making adjustments to contrast and clarity and color and vibrance and all that kind of stuff. And then ViscoCam is better if you want to kind of use filters and evoke a particular mood. I will say that most of the filters in ViscoCam are not good for food photos, but there are a couple that are really good. My favorites for food photos are in the A family and E family of presets. Now let's talk about some basics. Before you can learn how to edit food photography, you have to know some basics of photo editing. The tools you'll probably use the most in food photography editing are exposure, contrast, highlights and shadows, saturation and vibrance, clarity, sharpness, and white balance. First, exposure. Exposure is actually critical to photography as a whole, not just editing. So if you want to brush up on what exposure is and how it works, you can find a description in my food photography tips for the beginner series, which is linked below. Unfortunately, some apps treat brightness and exposure as the same concept, but they are not. When you increase or decrease exposure, for instance, you're going to affect the entire image in a more balanced way than if you were to increase or decrease just brightness. So that's why I always recommend to increase or decrease exposure and not brightness. So if you have a brightness tool, don't use it. I would use the exposure tool. Editing the shadows and highlights in your food photos can really transform them, in a good way or in a bad way. Shadows are the darkest part of the photo that have less detail there, and highlights are the brightest part of the photo that also have less detail there. When you shoot in RAW format, which I'll talk about in the next tip, you're able to recover a lot of the lost details in those really dark shadows and in those bright highlights. So that's why I recommend shooting in RAW, and I'll talk about that in a minute. You'll want to edit your shadows and highlights and increase them or decrease them depending on the mood and the look you're going for in your photo. So if you're looking for a dark and moody look, which is really popular in food photography right now, you're probably going to want to decrease your shadows and kind of embrace those dark shadows. But if you're looking for something bright and airy and summery, you might want to increase your highlights and not decrease decrease your shadows. Now for contrast. I don't want to get too technical in this video with definitions, so the one thing I'll say is usually food photos can benefit from a slight increase in contrast. And I say slight increase because you don't want something super high contrast because it's going to look unnatural. Now let's talk about vibrance and saturation. Like exposure and brightness, vibrance and saturation are similar concepts but not the same. So I always recommend increasing vibrance a little bit to make your photo pop more with more color, but I don't recommend increasing saturation most of the time because when you increase saturation, it's going to give it a more intense look, and when you increase vibrance and contrast, it will increase the intensity of the colors but in a more balanced and natural way. White balance is super important for food photography. It's also referred to as temperature, and it basically means how cool or warm your photo is, with cool photos looking more blue and warm photos looking more orange. Your white balance will be affected while you're taking your photo, and it'll be determined by the source of light, the type of light, the direction of light, the time of day. And so if you don't get it perfectly during your first time when you're taking the photo, you always have an opportunity to change it in editing. Like I mentioned before, food photography is very specific and sensitive, so if you change your white balance a lot, it can make your food look a lot different. It can make it look unappetizing, or it can make it look really nice. Finally, sharpness and clarity. These concepts are similar but not the same. Increasing clarity will give your photo darker edges, more detail, and more texture. I would increase clarity very slowly, if at all, because too much clarity can give your photo a really hard, defined, sharp look, which is usually not desired in food photography. You usually want something soft and light and kind of natural, so be careful with that tool. And sharpness is basically sort of how sharp a photo is, but don't think that you should just automatically increase it to the maximum value, because that can create a lot of unnecessary and unwanted noise, which is kind of like fuzziness and grain in your photo. So there's really a happy medium there, so don't take it too far. Now for something a little more technical. My fourth tip is to shoot in RAW format. A RAW file is the complete data from the camera. It hasn't been processed, it hasn't been compressed like a JPEG, and that means it has a higher quality, and that also means you have more freedom and flexibility to edit it. You can edit the values as much as you want, or as little as you want, in a way that you can't do as much with a JPEG. So that's why I always recommend shooting in RAW format. You're gonna get higher quality photos, and you're gonna be able to edit them more. Just FYI, you can't upload a RAW file to Instagram. You first have to process it and edit it in a software like Lightroom, or maybe a software on your computer, and then export it as a JPEG. Also, RAW files are a lot bigger than JPEG, so they're going to take up a lot more storage space, so I don't recommend just storing them on your laptop because you'll run out of space pretty quickly. I use an external storage drive that keeps all of my photos on there, so I will put that in the description box below in case you want to check it out. Food photography is a very intimate type of photography because everyone can relate to food. You might post a photo of pasta and someone 10,000 miles away might see your photo on Instagram. They might not speak the same language, they might not know what the dish is, but they can still relate to the food if it looks good, if it looks comforting, and if it looks like food. And that's why you want your food to look natural, so people can relate to it, people can identify with it, and people can even see themselves eating it. What you don't want to do is edit your food photos so much that they look unnatural or not real or sort of unidentifiable. You want people to know what it is that you're cooking and presenting. Here are some tips to steer you away from unnatural food photography editing. Do not oversaturate your colors. Again, I'm all about bright colors. My name is Rainbow Plant Life. My page is very bright and colorful, but I think there's a natural way to enhance your colors, and I think there's an unnatural way. Increasing the saturation too much on a food photo can make it look gaudy, harsh, unattractive, ugly, you name it. So just don't do it. Similarly, don't alter the hues or the colors too much. If you're posting a photo of an orange, let it look like the color orange. That's its name after all. Don't try to make it look red or pink. And while it's okay to make small adjustments here and there, sometimes it can really help, you want to be very methodical about it and very cautious about it. While HD editing can look really cool with maybe a landscape or architecture, it is not designed for food photography. It's going to make it look unnatural and like four-dimensional. And similarly, be cautious when you're increasing clarity. That can make your photo look really dark and unnatural, especially if you have a bright, sort of white-looking photo with an airy look. You really don't want to be increasing clarity there. It tends to look better if you increase it a little bit in a dark kind of photo. If you use any of the techniques I talked about today, leave me a comment below and give this video a thumbs up. And find me on Instagram at Rainbow Plant Life if you have any more questions about editing. And if you haven't subscribed already, please go ahead and hit that red subscribe button, because very shortly I'll be releasing a Lightroom food photo editing tutorial, and I know you'll want to see that. So stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.